So for those of you that don't know, live albums are kind of self-explanatory. They're albums that are recorded live, either at some sort of concert, a festival, sometimes even in a live room. You can find albums like that all over the place. Some of my favorite, to be honest, are John Mayer's Where the Light Is. I think it's a wonderful album. And it's honestly, in my opinion, I think it's some of the best work he's ever put out, just because it captures this energy that isn't always there when you're tracking things in a studio, because there's not natural like breath and air and like space. You're creating space oftentimes digitally, unless you're using kind of old-fashioned analog techniques of like recording everything within a church or a hall or whatever. But my point is that I think live albums capture this energy that all of us seem to love, and I think a lot of us can't get enough of, if you're like me. Another album that comes to mind is Ben Rector's Live from the Magic Tour. Honestly, I wasn't a huge Ben Rector fan a couple years ago, and then I met my wife, and she introduced me to him with the song Brand New, and I absolutely loved that song. But still, I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of his work, or I couldn't listen to the album start to finish necessarily. But then I went to go see him live, and that changed everything for me. Once I saw him live, I came to like understand his music, his personality, his energy up on stage, and it completely changed my viewpoint of him as an artist. Not that I was trashing on him before, but it helped me to understand just how talented he is. And when I had the awesome experience of sitting there in this huge theater and everybody's singing the words all around you because they know them, and my wife is having a great time, and the musicians are just like funky and jazzy and bluesy and just awesome. I mean, the players he has play with him are just amazing. So once you have all those kind of experiences, those experiences get fused into like your memory of the songs that you're listening to, and that changes your experience of that music. To where, honestly, I think if you experience a song live, you're going to actually like listening to the recorded, professional, sometimes even you get the feeling of like vacuum-packed vibe to the song. You're going to enjoy that version even more. So I think there's something about live music and live energy that just really captures something and grabs a hold of something within the human heart. So all that being said, I love live music. I think a lot of people do. Now, if you're like me a couple years ago, I did not know what the industry standard procedures for cutting and tracking and mixing and editing live albums was. If you're like me, I thought that live albums meant exactly what they meant. Everything was tracked then and there in that time. Maybe, I guess if I thought about it deeply enough, I'd understand that, things like EQ and compression, delay and reverb were added onto different parts that weren't necessarily there in the moment, because they're trying to recreate the sound of being there in that hall, in that theater, in that field out in the middle of the mountains, whatever it might be. But if you're like me, you probably didn't think that live could also include going back and retracking things. Or even worse, in my opinion, tracking things that were not there at all in the moment. Now, if you don't believe me, I'll actually link a video below in the description that's from one of my favorite YouTubers named Cochrane. He actually talks about how to mix a live album or a live song. He's part of the Recording Revolution. It's a company he started, a YouTube movement he started, helping people to record things at home. And so he's teaching how he mixed his church to make a live album for his church. And in that, he talks about how with his insider experience into the industry and just knowledge of how it works, he's like, part of how we're going to get this to sound really great is we're going to retrack vocals. And he's like, before you might explode on me in the comment section, let me tell you, this is an industry standard thing to do. And he's like, it's not just for the sake of making vocals sound better as far as like being able to be more on pitch and focus more. He's like, it's also just from a technical standpoint of it's really hard to get isolated vocals when you're doing stuff live, because that vocal mic is going to be picking up the drums, and it's going to be picking up the guitar and the bass, and maybe even just a little bit of the sound of the stage sort of thing with people yelling and screaming and everything. So he's like, it's really hard as a sound engineer, as a producer, to get the kind of vocal quality you need in order to be able to do your job properly. Now, I understand that. I understand, and I'm not a seasoned professional within mixing or producing or anything like that. I'm a simple guy that dreams about doing music, plays guitar, and makes art and music. I don't know everything about the industry, and I don't know everything about engineering. So I could understand what he's saying of it makes it easier to have an isolated vocal track. But once I heard that, and then he continued to go on to add different things that weren't actually there. He talked about how he's like, yeah, I'm going to go track some lead guitar stuff just because we didn't have a lead guitar player there that day. It kind of got to me a little bit. Now, before I go any further, this is not a criticism of Graham Cochrane whatsoever. I love that guy. Graham, if you're watching this, I appreciate your videos so much, both the Recording Revolution and the business side of stuff. This is not a criticism of Graham Cochrane. This is more a criticism of the habit, if he's accurate, which I think he is, the habit we have in the music industry of dishonestly labeling things. Now, what I mean by this is I think our first impulse when we hear the word live is we think it means exactly what it says, which is live. It was done there in the moment, not in the studio after the fact, not when you can calculate things and fix things and get everything to sound perfect. That's the purpose of live music, is that it doesn't sound perfect. That's even a huge reason why we enjoy live music so much, is because there's a risk associated to it. And there's also this humanness of like, they're going to mess up, but also there's this awesome virtuoso kind of thing. When you hear your favorite artist and they nail everything live, it makes you respect them even more, because you see, wow, they're not just sitting there doing 20 takes to get this guitar solo right. They just have the chops and the talent and the musical skill to just do it right there in the moment. For vocalists, it's like, wow, their pitch is actually that good in person. Wow, they are able to remember all their parts just like that, and they're that tight as a band. It's not just some drag and drop and getting everything to quantize properly. So here's my problem, is that I think any normal person that doesn't have industry insight is going to think that live means exactly what it says. Live. It was done there in that moment, not after the fact. So when I first found out about this, I was kind of upset, because I felt like I had been duped or deceived, which, to be honest, I think as long as you're not making excuses for it long enough, I think that's the appropriate response. And why? Because we're saying one thing while meaning another. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm thinking about, okay, back in the day when live things first started to become, I don't know the history of all this, but back in the day when live things first started to become popular, I'm sure everybody believed that this means it was done there in the moment. And my guess is somewhere along the way, somebody cheated and fixed some stuff beyond just EQing stuff to make it sound good or adding a little reverb here and there. That's mixing. I'm talking about actually changing the parts, which happens. That's why these live videos that we watch sound so perfect, is because honestly, more than likely, they're doctored. They're not live music videos. They're not live albums, because unless you're an extremist within the music industry, you're going back, you're retracking vocals. You might fix that little guitar part that you flubbed up on a little bit. You might retrack certain drum parts because maybe the snare wasn't mic'd up properly, or you're getting some feedback in something. You might add some pads in the background to just fill up the space a little more. This could not be true for everybody. But the fact that for Graham, being, I would say, an industry professional within the recording space and the production space, the fact that he's saying, if you're surprised by this, don't be. This is how your favorite live albums are produced for you, tells me this is a normal thing. And to be honest, it makes me kind of sad. Yeah, it makes me really sad, actually, because I think this is continuing the problem that we're seeing within the social media age sort of thing, which is that everything has to be perfect in order to be acceptable to share with other people. And so what am I saying with all this? Is I think my application as artists and as fellow artists and bands and guitar players and instrumentalists, whatever you might be, is if you're going to call yourself live, make sure it's actually live. I don't think we can just have this thing of like, well, that's just the way it is. You and I, especially if you're part of my generation where I'm kind of in between the millennial and Gen Z generation, but you and I are now coming up to where we're going to be the next industry professionals. We're going to be the next major artists. We're going to be the next whatever. And so you and I have the opportunity and perhaps even the responsibility to kind of shift things back away from this perfectionism, where all of a sudden it's okay for you to have a wrong note in a live recording. Because why? Because that's the pattern. We're used to that. If we change those expectations by changing the process, over time, I think we'll come to this place where all of a sudden having live recordings that might have a couple of wrong notes from a guitar solo, or the tone on the vocalist might be a little off, might get a little nasally, all of a sudden those things will be okay. And I don't want to degrade the quality of music. That's not what I'm looking for here. I just want it to be an accurate reflection of what it's always been, which is imperfect. I'd like to encourage you as an up-and-coming artist or as an up-and-coming band to share in a standard that I've created for myself. Honestly, if I'm gonna call something live, I'm gonna let it be 100% live. I really don't believe it's honest to call something live that's been severely manipulated and doctored to sound perfect. If you messed up the guitar solo, don't go back and retrack and fix it. If your vocals sound like garbage, maybe don't use that take and wait till you do a better job at it, or unashamedly post it anyways. If we want to keep these methods, I think that's okay, but I think we need to more accurately label them, that people understand what it is they're consuming. So, 1, either call your stuff live, or if you're gonna fix it, 2, call it live enhanced. And if it's super, super doctored, maybe just release it as a regular song. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section. I know there's probably a lot of people that disagree with me. Let me know why. If you believe that it's okay to doctor things and get things sitting just right, and still call it live, let me know why. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And for those of you that are kind of like me and were shocked and maybe even a little betrayed that your live albums were doctored and changed and weren't actually 100% transparent live, let me know your thoughts. And also 3, let me know what your favorite live album is. Like I said, I named a couple of mine. There's probably some more that I'm not thinking of. No, those are the albums I listen to. Anyways, let me know what your favorite live album is in the comment section. I would love to hear, because I'm always looking for new music. So let me know, guys.